Well, hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the Reiki Lifestyle Podcast. Colleen and I are super excited to be here with Lorna McLean. Hi, Lorna. You just want to say hi real quick. And she is actually joining us from Scotland. So it's always wonderful to have our international guests on here as well. So I'm going to go ahead and read Lorna's bio and just how you can get a hold of her real quick, and then we'll go ahead and get into it. A few announcements from us. We always have upcoming animal Reiki classes, human Reiki classes. Our free distance Reiki share is on Tuesday mornings at 9:30 a.m. Pacific. And those are free and open to everyone of all lineages and Reiki experience levels. So if you just even want to come and check out what Reiki is, you are more than welcome to come and join that circle. It's always an amazing circle of people. So I think that's kind of the announcements. Everything else you can always find at reikilifestyle.com. We will also be talking upcoming about our gratitude ceremony that we offer in November. Again, we'll have more announcements around that. And then also about our next step classes and 12 Heavens class that is opening in the new year. But again, we'll talk more about that at another time. So again, you can find out more about all of that at reikilifestyle.com. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it because that's the fun part. Lorna McLean is based in Glasgow, Scotland. Sensitive since childhood, Lorna was fortunate to be born into a family that was pretty forward-thinking for the late 1950s. She's always had an interest in animals, plants, and all things nature. Lorna worked in the corporate world of insurance for many years. She came to Transcendental Meditation in her early 20s. Then, out of her own interest and over many years, she trained in many complementary modalities and eventually started a small business as a holistic therapist after her children were born. Reiki, Munay Ki Rites, and aspects of tantras have been a passion for Lorna. These days, her Reiki teachings and other workshops take precedent. Her current offerings include Reiki, Munay Ki Rites. Lorna, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Munay Ki.
Munay Ki. Okay, thank you. Reflexology, women's circles, birthing doula, personal guidance and mentoring, sacred witnessing, spiritual and holistic counseling, one-to-one sessions, and ongoing support. She first became consciously aware of Reiki in 1996 and started teaching in 2002. So you can find Lorna, and we'll announce this at the end, and then it's always in the show notes too. But you can find Lorna. Her website is Lorna McLean, and that is spelled MCLEAN, McLean.co.uk. And then her email is lorna@lornamclean.co.uk. And then she's found on Instagram, Facebook at Lorna McLean. So welcome. We're super excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm very excited to be here with you both. It's just a wonderful thing to be invited here, especially coming across the ocean.
I know. It's such a wonderful part of the technology that we just get to meet and spend time together through these means.
So fortunate. I can't believe, I mean, all the difficult things that have happened in the past couple of years, but to have this has been such a wonderful opportunity for everyone to connect at such a, from everywhere, like anywhere in the world is just fantastic.
I know, it's so amazing. And we actually met Lorna in one of our animal Reiki classes. That's how we got, met you and got to know you a little bit. And then we've seen you in different things and talked to you about kind of the different things that are going on over there and in your practice. And it's just been lovely to get to know you. And that's one of the things that's amazing about this is that, through technology, we got to meet you and get to know you a little bit, and otherwise we probably would not have.
Yeah, I mean, I've been teaching about animal Reiki for a while now. Probably all of my Reiki teachings have included something to do with animals. But when I see, what you're both offering this animal Reiki course. It was so amazing to be able to join that from a distance for 5 whole days. It was just, and it gave me so much more that I could add to what I was offering. So just a blessing all around.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about that? We were talking just before this about how that might come up, but seems to have come up
straight away.
Yeah, straight away. So why don't you talk about some of that and some of the work that you do in animal Reiki where you were at?
Yeah, well, here in Glasgow, I've been teaching Reiki for a long, long time, and animals do come into my class all the time because I've always had animals myself. And when I first was attuned to Reiki, the first people that I attuned were my family, my mum, my sister, and my dad. And I think that, to be honest, they were just humoring me because this might be like another cult that Lorna had joined, especially after the Transcendental Meditation. So, but what they did was they immediately got involved with the animals that we had at home. So it was just an automatic thing. My dad, when I was young, he could put his hands on my head and take away a headache. And that was just my dad's hands, but we didn't know about Reiki at that time, and we didn't think about it as being healing. It was just that Dad could do this. So there's always been an awareness of, as I got older, an awareness of something going on. But when I think back to like what I know now, when I think back to my childhood and how my dad was in particular, then I guess that must have been some form of Reiki that he was doing. It was certainly healing. And there was always like a bird in a box, being healed, or a little mouse that he'd found, or some other creature that he'd found in the garden that needed some kind of care. And we were witness to that as young children. So it was very, very, it was just automatic that would come into the classes in the same way that teaching children has done. My children were very young when they received their Reiki attunements. They were 9 years old, and it was both, they were asking for that, and I wasn't teaching then. So again, it's been a very natural process to bring animals into the Reiki class, and also children into a Reiki class, and just teaching that for children particularly. And now I feel, by coming to you both, I now have a much more structured way of teaching animal Reiki that can bring so much more awareness. And there's so many more people that will come to an actual animal Reiki class rather than just wanting to know a few questions about Reiki that I was doing before about animals. So I feel it's just opened everything up so much more for people that are interested in learning more about animals. We've got a lot of friends who have greyhounds, and I've got friends who are in the police who have, we've discussed this before, they have police dogs. And this has been just wonderful to be able to share that with other people that are interested to give their animals the very best that they can. Whether that's through their work, like the police dogs, through their work, being able to offer, these dogs are trained, well, you'll know, these dogs are trained to such a degree, but they're also the police handlers' pets. Okay, so when those dogs go back home to the house, they're just the pets. Now, I'm not sure, but I can't hear either of you.
Oh, you probably hear me, but Colleen, I think
okay, that's fine. I can hear you.
Yeah.
So those police dogs in particular that I mentioned before are now being retired between either age or ill health, and they're now with the police dog handler at her home as her pets, which is just wonderful that she's been able to keep them, but also for everyone who has pets. I mean, we've all got cats and whatever you've got, and it's just wonderful for them. I have a she's 6 now, a 4-year-old. She came to me as a 4-year-old stray, and she was really feisty and bitey, but she loves the Reiki, and she's now inviting people into the house and meeting my clients at the door and doing the things that all my cats have done in the past, and this wee stray cat is now part of the team, and it's just wonderful. People love it.
It's amazing.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Well, I think one of the things you talked about that has been so helpful for us, or to us, is, as you know, that whole animal Reiki course and the manual was really given to us by the animals, by Reiki. It was through a process of Reiki journeys, and the four of us each having unique skills with how we practice Reiki with animals, because like you, we always did. And we still do. I mean, everybody practicing Reiki with animals, they don't have to take this course to do that. But I think what I'm so grateful for is how skill oriented it is, as well as the energy. So really giving people the tools they need to be able to practice confidently with skill, talking about things like those dogs where they are service dogs and then pets, and how does that transition? And as the practitioner, even having the skill to know how to let Reiki go in and just do that for the animal. Like there's nothing we have to do, but the energy does it. And I think that's what we are also so very pleased about, how the animal Reiki courses came out, and then having the structure as a practitioner. And then if you're going to teach it, also having the structure for teaching it too.
The first class that I did after being with you both, and Sue as well on that class, I had an animal communicator come to the class, and she'd already done a Reiki with someone else, and then she came in and did another class with me. But she came to the first and second degree animal Reiki class, and she already, as I say, she takes care of greyhounds here in Scotland, her and her family, but she's also doing this animal communication. And I was, explaining to her that this isn't an animal communication course. However, it gives you all these other skills, and that's exactly what she was looking for, to be able to weave those things together, which I think having that structure, Colleen, it just gave so much. I'm just excited about being able to share it. It's great.
Well, tell us how you're doing that in Scotland. Like,
so
what's your practice like? And, you can get into your story and, but how is that? How are you? What are you, what I'm saying?
Well, generally, my for many years, I've been teaching Reiki since 2002. And that when I did the masterclass, it was like I was absolutely compelled to teach immediately. And as I say, the very next day, it was how quickly could I get people into chairs to attune them, and that was my own family. And then within 4 weeks, I had 4 people in a class, and I really was, flying by the seat of my pants, because I hadn't done this before. But really, the passion for teaching just came right through me, and I'm so inspired constantly. Every single class that I teach, whether it's first degree or masters or Karuna, and now I'm going to be teaching Reiki drumming soon as well. And every class, it's almost as if I sit down in the chair that I sit in, and it just comes in, and there it is. And every class is inspiring, for me as well as for the people in the class. And the feedback I get is incredible. And you know yourself how, if it's your passion, you can't not do it. You have to keep doing it. So a lot of my year is planned out so that I teach. I try to take every other weekend off. It doesn't always work out that way, but I try to take every other weekend off. So I teach 2 weekends a month generally. And that might be first and second degree together. Some people will come to the first degree class. Some people will come to both. I teach master practitioner and master teacher 3-day class together, but sometimes I teach the master practitioner class on its own, because a lot of people are not ready to do the teaching class, or they just don't want it. They might come in later for the extra 2 days. So I've always split that up. And the same with Karuna. I teach first and second, and then the master class as 3 days, but some people just come to the first 2 days. And that's always, I've been teaching Karuna since 2005. And of course, all these wonderful upgrades we've been getting recently from the Holy Fire. The minute Holy Fire was mentioned, I was there, you know, and I couldn't get to William's class in Glastonbury in 2014, but I got to another class in 2015 where a teacher from down in Devon came up to Glasgow and taught me in my own house. So, you know, I then went on and learned with William in Jerusalem just so that I had it, you know, directly from him. But even during lockdown, I'm so inspired to always learn more that I went back and redid my first and second degree with William online just last year. And people are saying, you know, why would you do that? And I'm like, well, why would you not? Why would you not want to be a student again in a Reiki class? And I encourage people to come back in, you know, and revisit their classes, because I've done that all along, ever since I did my first degree, which honestly, when I think back to that time, I went to that first degree class and honestly didn't feel anything. And there was 8 of us in the class. And I remember thinking, that didn't work for me. I wonder why they're all talking about seeing colors and things and feeling things. And I didn't get any of that. And to be honest, I enjoyed the class, but I honestly thought it hadn't worked for me and maybe I had wasted my money. So it was about a year later and I was at a crystal, I was standing at a crystal stall at a mind, body and spirit fair in Glasgow. And the woman whose house the first degree class had happened in, she came up beside me and she said, Lorna, how are you getting on with your Reiki? And I said, well, it didn't work for me. And she said, Lorna, come and see me. I'm now a Reiki teacher. Come and see me and let's have a chat about this. So I kind of reluctantly went to see her and she gently persuaded me to do my second degree with her. And she helped me understand that it really didn't matter if I didn't feel anything. And I thought, gosh, I wish somebody had told me that in the first degree class. However, I'm really glad they didn't, because it reminds me to tell people that in a first degree class, that it doesn't matter if you don't feel anything. And from that moment of doing my second degree, it was like the universe just put things in front of me, guided me. I was offered a position in a community health project here in the East End of Glasgow, where people who couldn't afford Reiki could come and receive it anyway, because it was a funded project and I would get paid. And I started to gradually move out of my corporate job, just changing my hours and making sure that, you know, I was a single parent at this time with 2 young children, with no additional support. And I thought, you know what, I don't want to do that anymore. I was working in the wrong kind of energy completely. And I gradually built up my own business and went into this community project, which really helped to teach me so much about the human condition and how, you know, all we need is love, really, truly. And I was working with people from every walk of life, people who had been in jail, people who had murdered people, every kind of situation. And yet I was completely safe and completely trusted and held in that position. And it really did teach me so much. Not long after that, I went on to work in a hospital and I was still doing Reiki, but I was doing this other hospital work part-time. And again, it taught me about the human condition and how fragile we are and how really we just need to support each other. And it was just wonderful to be able to, you know, it's really humbling. I think, you know, I don't really know how to put the words to it. However, it encouraged me more and more to grow my Reiki practice. And so Reiki is the main core of my business, but more importantly of my life. And I'm so grateful. I really believe in that we need to have an attitude of gratitude, and that really will sustain us through an awful lot. It'll bring good things to us as well.
I'm so curious as to kind of what you saw as a teacher in both of those settings, but specifically in the community center.
Yeah. I would work there 12 hours a week. And there was other things going on in the community project. Some people were going there for reflexology, or there was also an Alcoholics Anonymous group that went there, and various other things. But for me, it was really about the Reiki, and they would come to me purely for Reiki. And some people were being referred from their doctors, which was really unusual at that time, because we're going back 20 years. Mm. And one woman who's become a very dear friend, she was referred from her doctor because of her MS. And I know she wouldn't mind me speaking about this. And she came to me, and all she really did was talk. It was very rarely the opportunity to get her onto the therapy couch, because she really just wanted to talk. But I understood, and I said, look, you know, the room is full of Reiki, and it's coming through my voice, and it's here in my eyes, and it's here in the room, and she knows, she totally understands this now, because she's now an Asui Holy Fire and Karuna Reiki master herself, and she does great work in the community as well, helping with suicide prevention, and also working for Marie Curie, which is one of our cancer hospices here in Glasgow. She's done great work there volunteering. So it's completely changed her life, and so many others, of course, but that's just one woman who came to me of many, many. I'm so fortunate to be witness to that.
Yeah. And it was funded too. That's the other thing.
Yeah, it was lottery funded, and also some other funding that they got, 3 or 4 different fundings. And that ran for a lot of years. It's now no longer there, which is very unfortunate. A lot of these centres in Glasgow have closed down. However, they did great work when they were there. And I'm very honoured to be part of that.
Beautiful.
Well, thank you. And when we were talking earlier, one of the things you talked about was your children and children in Reiki.
Yeah, very much.
Tell us about that.
So Rachel and Jonathan were born into this because I was already a complementary therapist. So they were born with, you know, massage going on and reflexology going on, and then eventually Reiki. And of course, I'd been meditating for years before I had the children as well. So it was a natural thing for them to be a part of what was happening in the house. They would see my clients come and go. When they were about, well, there's only a year between them. And when Rachel was 9, she said to me, Mum, I want to learn Reiki, because they would both sit and meditate with me. And from the age of 3 and 4, they also learned a children's form of Transcendental Meditation, because it was just a lifestyle for us. So Rachel eventually learned, and my ex-husband at the time was reluctant about that. But eventually he said, okay, and she managed to talk him round, and that was great. So she learned Reiki. And the following year, Jonathan asked, and to be honest, I was thinking, is he just doing that because she's doing it? But he really, really wanted to. And the surprise for me was that my ex-husband, we were still married at the time, and he said, I think I'll go too. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Maybe this will bring us closer together. And it didn't do that. However, the children both learned Reiki. It was great for them for school. Their friends got to know that this was the house that Reiki happened in. And of course, when their pals came round, there was always Reiki going on. And they knew a lot about crystals already, more than I did. So there was always crystals and Reiki. Soon after that, my ex-husband and I got separated, and I moved away, and the kids came between the 2 houses for a while, and that didn't really work out, and the kids eventually stayed with me. They went into high school, and the Reiki was always there. And my daughter Rachel, she was gifted, gosh, I mean, I can't believe it, she was gifted a 2-year scholarship in crystal healing. And she was learning so much and I was fascinated, that I went and did the course. I had to pay for it, of course, but I went and did the course too. And Jonathan had already been talking a lot about crystals, and he was talking about things that were happening for him through the night. He would leave his body, he would bring back messages, and there was all sorts. I mean, I could write books about it, to be honest. Anyway, unfortunately, we had a really terrible accident. Rachel and Jonathan were in a car accident, and Jonathan passed away when he was 17. And Rachel thankfully survived, but she was 4 years in recovery, and it was a very difficult time for us, of course. However, we still we still get communication from Jonathan, 14 years later. It's incredible, actually. And he's often in a Reiki class, and it'll be other people that tell me this, because I don't see him with my eyes. I can sometimes feel him, and I certainly get messages and I get visions through the night. But other people see things in the room, and quite often it clearly relates to Jonathan. So he was 17 when he passed over, but what a shining light he was, and such a, he shared so much. And there's a whole story that attached to that, but it would take me too long to tell you on here. So we'll just, that's enough to say about that today.
Okay.
But teaching children, I mean, because my children were brought up with this, it was the most natural thing in the world to actually start a children's Reiki class. And it would be maybe only a 4-hour class, and we would bring in things like crystals and, of course, Reiki attunements and a bit of meditation and a bit of hands-on. Just lots of other things to go into the garden, give the plants Reiki, give the animals Reiki if the cat was in, things like that. Just have a few kids around. And honestly, I've been teaching children Reiki for a lot of years now, and it's always a beautiful thing. And it's often a birthday gift or a Christmas gift from parents to their children. And it's always children who have come from Reiki parents that come along, or an aunt or somebody, somebody in the family who's had Reiki, and the children are interested. Because I always say, do the children want to come? First of all, do the children want to come? And in our country, I don't know how it is over there, but here, you have to have police clearance and things like that if you're going to be working with children. So we have to take care of all those things and make sure it's on our insurance and all that stuff. But certainly it's a joy, an absolute joy. So I just teach a 1st degree class. And I guess the youngest child I've taught has been about 3.5, which is a bit young to maintain their concentration on anything, because we have to keep it short bites of things, just to change it round quite a lot, just so that we can keep their interest. But mostly it's so easy. And usually, like, I do a class from, say, age 6 to age 11 or 12, and then if they're coming into like being a little bit older, we can do a teenage class. And some of them are they're really mature, and they can come into an adult class. So it's great.
So if parents want to have their kids take kids Reiki where you are, do they just go to your website to find out your classes, or just get in touch with you?
They usually just get in touch. It is on my website, and most of my website, everything's on the website, but mostly it's just contact Lorna, and then I just deal with it myself directly, and we set up a date, and we'll maybe get, if I teach children's Reiki, it's probably only twice a year, because we're maybe going with the holiday breaks. Where with 1st degree, I might be teaching it every month or every 6 weeks or something. Masters, I might only teach 3 or 4 times a year, that kind of thing. So I space it out. But children's Reiki, I probably teach twice a year.
Well, that's certainly something that I did when you were talking about the youngest one. I think the youngest child that I attuned, well, aside from Robyn's baby,
I was going to say 2 weeks.
she was Robyn took a Corona class when she was about 2 weeks pregnant.
Well, you're going to get your attunement right there for your baby, aren't you?
Yeah, that was exactly what happened. Yeah,
it's so lovely when you see people who are coming into your class that are pregnant, and like, I know the baby's getting attuned as well, and I'm saying, that your baby's going to be attuned, and then they're like, the kid's going around like this, and she's only 1.
Yeah.
It's great.
That's it. She's so connected to it. And it was really funny though, because Luna has a lot of chi. She's has a lot of, that's what we say, she has a lot of ki. So she's definitely full Luna all the time. And we were my husband made a joke the other day, like, or a couple of weeks ago. He's like, well, what do you expect when you have a worldwide global Reiki community giving her Reiki in the womb all the time?
At least that's great. He understands it.
That's so awesome. You didn't
course.
tell me you said that. That's so true.
Anyway, Colleen, you were telling us, you were talking about something.
I don't know. I was just talking about the little boy. He was 2.5. He was the youngest that I ever taught Reiki to. And I was relating it as you were talking because it was also a really fun part of my own development with animal Reiki too, because I had the kids work with my horses and the trees on the farm. We had a farm at the time. And he was 2.5, but his sister was coming to the class. She was 5. His mother and his grandmother had Reiki, and he asked for it. He was very definite. I want to do this. And I'm not kidding you. When I gave him the attunement and I tapped his little hand, and he just looked at it, but not like he was just like, look, I mean, in awe. And I loved it because with the kids, they just have no filters or veils. It's an authentic, immediate reaction. And his
Completely.
sister at the time, she went into like the most delightful giggles. They were like, felt like just these little beautiful bubbles of laughter, filling everything. And we really, it was so fun because even there too, on that farm, we had pretty definite areas of fairy glens. And so we would work with the kids with the fairies and then the trees and the horses. And it was one of the first times when I really saw an animal say, I'm finished. So my horse, Dakota, he was also attuned to Reiki. And so he loved it, and he loved being with the kids, and they were giving him Reiki. And it was so clear when he was finished, because he turned around gently, turned around, walked into the stall, put his head in the corner. Like, I'm good.
It's amazing,
okay, take
isn't
those
it?
kids into another spot.
Wow.
So anyway, as you were sharing about it, that was one of the kids' ones that I taught that was really special. One of the first ones, and the one where he was 2.5.
It's amazing. I love that you said your Dakota horse, your horse is attuned. I've attuned quite a lot of animals. And I remember the first time it happened, and people are sometimes like, you can't attune a dog. How would a dog know? But I've had a dog put its paws in my hand and look right in my eyes and say to me, you are attuning me now. And it's happening. And this one particular dog, she's since passed over quite recently. Her name's Tasha, and she was a Labradoodle. So she's this big, gorgeous, poodly type dog, but the size of a Labrador. And she was a therapet. So her mum was a vet, and she was a dog blood donor, and also a Reiki dog. So just lovely. I do a little certificates for the dogs, so the owners love that,
That's such a cute
it's got paws on it and stuff. Yeah.
I love that.
The owners love it. Can I bring my dog to get attuned?
Yeah.
So
it's just lovely.
All the people listening that are animal Reiki practitioners and teachers, for that to be
it's a good idea.
That's really cute.
Yeah. It's lovely.
Well, that's it, when again, and kind of developing the course and everything with the animals and asking them how they wanted it to be, and specifically about the attunements, that they're very clear that they will ask. And, there's a very definite yes with it. And the ones that are asking for it, or the ones that say yes when their caregivers ask. So this one horse that I worked with, big Frisian, which is the big black kind of beautiful horses, and named Zarek. And he was very clear that he wanted a Reiki attunement. And the way he would do it, he was a stallion. So I stayed on this side of the fence to do the work on him, but I just had my hands up, and he would walk around his pasture and he'd come and put his head directly in my hands. And then he would just stay there for a minute. And then he'd go back around and come back and put his head right in my hands again, and did this for probably a good 15 minutes, where it was very clear that he was saying yes to it. This is what he wanted. He had been having really bad skin allergies, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong. And during that time, he actually showed me, and physically through observation, he actually walked the paddock, went right underneath a walnut tree and stood underneath it, and the leaves and branches were touching his skin. In addition, everything was falling from the trees on the ground, and he was rolling in it. And so it showed right then and there, oh, here's the main source of the allergy. So, the animals are just so perceptive. And again, like the kids, they just don't have the same veils that we have as adults a lot of times.
Absolutely. In the children's classes, I learned so much from the kids. It's very child-led. There is a bit of a structure, in that certain things happen, but it doesn't have to be the way I have it, in my head, or the way it's written down, because we have to just go with the flow. And I learned so much that way with the children. They teach me, like you say, that there's no veil. It's just all there, and they see it. It's amazing. We had a Reiki gathering one year, and we had Tasha the dog at the Reiki gathering. We were doing a talk at the Reiki gathering about animals and Reiki. That's gone back about 8 years, I think. And it's just amazing how many people are so keen to hear about this, because most of us have a pet. Most of us have a cat or a dog, at least. So it's important, I think, that it becomes more and more widespread to have animal Reiki available for animal carers. It's great.
Well, and even in the family, just like having Reiki for you as for just your family, but also that includes our pets are our family.
Yeah, that's our family, of course. Of course. My daughter has a little cat called Ollie. It's my grand cat. And he's getting to enjoy Reiki now. He's kind of quite enjoying it. So it's great to know that it's all happening there too. When I go over, he's quite willing to receive.
Well, I think it's such a natural thing too when you get your attunement. So for many of us to think, like you said, the first place that I go is, family, kids, and pets in the home, and especially for kids,
in your own home.
Yeah, and especially for kids, like it's such a natural connection there, because like being able to practice on the animals, it's where they feel so connected. And I know through crafts and stuff like that, but with kids and Reiki, it's such a it's so interesting to watch that connection, and that's kind of one of the first places that they go.
And if we have Reiki in our home, that's what it's all about, as far as I'm concerned. There's many of us out here teaching it, of course, but it has to be in the home first, doesn't it? So we have to be living it, as a way of life.
So true.
Yeah.
Lorna, I'm kind of curious, because a lot of our listeners are actually in the US. So I'm kind of curious about what Reiki looks like in Scotland, and how it looks like in the general population, and Reiki in general in Scotland.
Well, here in Glasgow anyway, Scotland's quite a small place. And we do have a really good spiritual community, I feel, that we have. And maybe that's because I'm teaching Reiki quite prolifically, and I also create opportunities for the spiritual community to come together, whether that's in a Reiki share, or a Reiki class, or a Reiki gathering, or some other event that I'm involved with. which might include other kinds of spiritual ways of living, or people that, I don't know, I seem to attract people who ask me to create an event for them. So this has been going on for years, and I don't know why it's me, but it is, and I can do it. So, and I love doing it actually, but sometimes it's very time consuming. Before Jonathan died, just about 6 months before Jonathan died, so I'm going back to 2008, and I had in my head, I had a thought of, if we could get all the Reiki people that I already know that have come, even if it's just to my classes, and by that time I'd been teaching for about 6 years, so I had quite a good list of people in my emails, and I thought I'll send an email to everybody and I'll see if they would like to come to a Reiki gathering. And I sent this email out, and it was probably, it'd been in my head for months, but it was probably about 4 weeks before Jonathan died, and of course we didn't know this was going to happen. And I didn't get one response, not one. And I actually wondered, did that even send? And I checked, and it definitely sent, but not one person responded. And I know now, I understand now, that the universe was taking care of me, because there's no way I would have been able to do that when, the intention that I had of doing it that year. However, maybe towards the end of that year, I went to see someone who talked about angels. Her name was Patricia. And she said to me, what do you want to do? And I says, I want to have a Reiki gathering. And she says, well, let's do it then. So we got together and we created this Reiki gathering, and we just called it the Scottish or the Glasgow Reiki Gathering. And we hired a big hall in Glasgow, the concert hall, and we had 150 people there. And we were amazed that people just turned up, and we had people talking at it. We had vendors selling things like crystals and books and all sorts of stuff. And from that, there's since been 10 Reiki gatherings. We do one a year. Well, Patricia's no longer involved in it, but we're still friends, and she sometimes does something, and she'll maybe come along. But we have sound healers come along. So every year there's some kind of sound element to our Reiki gathering. It's a full day event. And this brings the spiritual community in Glasgow together, but sometimes from other places too. They might travel from England up, or from, all over the place actually. And we have this gathering of like-minded, like-hearted people. And it's just such a wonderful day. And I do believe that event from all those years ago is what has helped to bring this community together. And of course, there's all sorts of other things going on in the periphery. But I feel that we're in a very special place here, and we have a really good hub for people coming together here in Glasgow. As I say, I'm invited often to do other events, and it might be, I've hosted people like Masaru Emoto. I don't know if you know about the Messages in Water by another Reiki teacher called Masaru Emoto. So he's now passed on, but before he died, I was invited to do an event for him here in Glasgow, and he came over and we did an event for him. And then we've got Lama Kemsa Rinpoche, who lives in London. He often does events here in Glasgow as well. And we've become good friends over the years, and I do his events when he comes to Glasgow as well. And there's various other things that have happened over the years. And these are opportunities for people to come together. So because of, us all being locked down and all the stuff that's been happening this past couple of years, we did one online, and that actually attracted even more people, which was lovely. So I'm now getting called, when are you doing another Reiki gathering, Lorna? And I'm like, I actually don't have time this year, so I'll maybe get to it next year again. But I do believe here in Scotland, we're very fortunate. Robyn, to answer that question, we're very fortunate. There's a lot of us here. It's certainly growing, and it's not all about what I'm doing, clearly. I'm just one person shining my wee light here in Glasgow, but all over the place. I know people all over Scotland and England and in Ireland and Wales as well, the whole of the British Isles. There's lots going on here. And we have holistic events, holistic ways events. It's actually happening in Edinburgh in the next couple of weeks, where people come in again. There's lots of stalls, people sell, but they can also advertise themselves and come together. And that's how we network. There's a lot of good networking that goes on. And like like you say about, advertising yourself on your, obviously on your own podcast and allowing me to be here today, you're offering me to advertise myself. This is what we do in Scotland as well. In all my classes, I'll say to people, what are you doing? Is there anything that we can share for you? Because otherwise, how does it get out? How do we get to know?
Yeah. Well, it's really an exciting thing to think about is to can people get on like an email list of yours?
Yeah.
Hear about your events in case they want to travel to Scotland and
join a Reiki
gathering next year, or something that you're doing.
Of course, and it might be that there's another online thing anyway. So yeah, lorna@lornamclean.co.uk. You can email me, or of course check the website, lornamclean.co.uk, and you'll see what's coming up.
Oh, right. You have it all on your calendar on your website.
Yeah, it comes up on the website as events or one-to-ones, and then of course you can email me to see. But if you go on my email, then I'll add people to my email, and they can see what's coming up.
Oh, great. Yeah, because as you're speaking, I'm like, oh, I want to go to that. I want to go to that.
Come on over.
I know, I was thinking the same thing. All right, how soon can I get to Scotland?
Exactly. Well, and I know when you guys are there in other countries and Americans show up, and I was like, well, my grandparents were Scottish or Irish or from Wales or England, and it's hard to really relay the feeling that is inside when you have that genetic calling.
There's an ancestral link for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's so strong. And I was even thinking that as you were talking about how fortunate in your lineage that the healing was a part of the way you were raised. And it feels very, like as you were talking about it, I felt like I could really hear your ancestors in the background for, however long in the lineage of healers.
Yeah. I'd love to know more about that, because we don't know an awful lot about my dad's history. And he's now passed over, and most of his family have too. So we'll probably never get to know. But I know enough about my dad. And that's the most important thing, to know that was there with him. And he was very, I'm going to say shamanic. It's not a word that I use often because it can be misused, but he was very shamanic in his ways of being very close to the earth and, teaching us from very, very young children about little insects and creatures, all creatures great and small, and about the animals and the trees and the plants, and helping us to, planting carrots and things like that. I can remember planting, vegetables in the ground and things when we were young. So I'm going to be 64 soon. It's a long time ago, but it's something that's a real joy in my memory. And my mum, she was more like the fairy queen, She'd be foraging for things, and there was always foraging going on. So and she's still like that. My mum's still with us. She's 86 and she's just amazing. So we're very fortunate.
So what, does she go into the woods and get
she loves to go into the woods or onto the beach, and would be foraging for shells or any sort of gorgeous stones and all that kind of thing. So there was always a basket with things in it being collected. And my daughter Rachel's like that as well. She's very like so we're very lucky actually to have, when I look back and I hear other people's stories and how harrowing their childhoods have been, and I don't have that memory. I have a very good memory of my childhood, and I'm very fortunate, very aware of how lucky I am actually.
Sounds very blessed. And as you were talking about the foraging, I thought, Robyn, that's the new name for Luna.
What?
Luna is a forager.
That's true. She is. She collects treasures.
A good way to put that.
Lots and lots of treasures.
She definitely collects treasures.
And gems and, all the things. She likes all her shiny things, and she collects, just a lot of things.
The rocks and the sticks and the moss and the plants and the little critters, and and then
Oh, it's
bring them all
wonderful.
home.
It does bring them all home. Yes.
My kids were the same. Yeah. And Rachel's still like that. She'll still forage. And in fact, this weekend, her and her friends were having some ceremony, and she was over at the house saying, Mum, what have you got? What candles have you got? What crystals have you got? What sticks of wood? And what can we have for a fire? She's all, we've got a kind of, it's like I don't know, it's a thing in our house where we say you don't leave the house without a bag of something. And this happened from like when we were small, and once I get married, it was like you'd go and see my mum and dad, and you always got sent home with food or a bag of something. So it's the same if Rachel comes to stay over or comes to visit, she'll always leave with something. So the other day it was candles and sticks for the fire.
I love
Great
it.
fun.
It's such a good way to frame it, because they do. My other
Yeah.
granddaughter's the same way.
It helps actually a little bit, like, oh yeah, she's just collecting things, like a little
Yeah, it's fine.
forest fairy or a little forest troll or something, She can have
Yeah.
a little collection of things.
Yeah.
Well, she did say that one night when she was, how kids can be, and they just say things that completely come through, and she did say before she came here, she was in school. She said, before I came here, I was in school. She was probably about 3 at the time, maybe 3.5, right around there. So I always wonder, it's like, so if you were in school before here, I wonder what you were, that you had to be in school. Like, to me, it seems like she was in human school to like learn about what it takes to be,
To be a human. Yeah. Gosh.
huh? Or maybe
There's
every
some
school before they come here. So I always wonder, like, I wonder what was before the school. Yeah.
it's amazing when we listen to our children. And I've often said to parents in a class, listen to your children, because often we dismiss what they're saying, or we tell them that that's their imagination. Whoops. Jonathan was very clear as a child. He can remember past lives, and he could remember, he would talk about his family in another universe, and how, Mum, I come back, I go there at night, but I come back because this is where I live this time, and it's interesting because now that he's not here physically, I think maybe he comes to visit me. I'm the family in the other universe now. Do you know what I mean? It's just because he does still come back. And I'm thinking, all these years on, he's maybe, I don't know, reincarnated, or maybe he's away being a butterfly, or I don't know. I mean, none of us really know, do we? And I think, well, whatever it is, he's welcome anyway, in whatever form. But it's amazing the messages that have come through.
I love that.
But yeah, but when he was here as well, he would, there was a lot, and he was very like my dad. And would talk to the plants and the trees. You could feel the pain of trees, like, Mum, this tree needs healing, things like that.
Love
it's
that.
wonderful just to listen to them.
Yeah, it's so true. They do
Pay
say
attention
the
to
most
them.
amazing things. And, how do you help them? She's really going through like a monsters under the bed phase right now. And, how do you help them through that, and also not, diminish their imagination and some of those kinds of things. But I love that idea about, because I've kind of wondered about that too with reincarnation, but then that we know those experiences that we have with people who have, transitioned, and that idea of like, well, I wonder sometimes, like, how does that work with reincarnation, but yet they still, visit us. And such a fascinating thought of that, maybe they're, have reincarnated, but they're here visiting us in different forms and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Are we everything everywhere all the time? I don't know.
True. Yeah.
It fascinates me.
That it's, maybe I put these limiting kind of ideas or constructs around that, but really it's just, we're consciousness and, infinitely capable of those things.
But in this human spacesuit that we call a body, we have a limited view. We can only see a certain amount. So, who knows? It's vast. My ex-husband passed away a couple of years ago, and he came back to say that when he was here, he could see this, but now he can see this. And so he could see where things could have been better, you know, for us, I mean. And I just find that amazing, because he didn't believe in any of that, you know.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
They had my dog passed away last year, and we had always said, like, this is his last time. He wants to come back next time as a human. Like, this is his last lifetime, or as a dog, at least for right now. And he wants to come back as human. And when he passed, I was a little worried, because my other dog I felt very connected to. She stayed very close. She had passed about a year beforehand, and she stayed very close. And this one, when he passed, I was like, I actually had called Colleen and was like, what's happening? Did he not go into the light? Like, which I don't really believe for animals, is, you know, they transition normally so fast. So it was like, where is he? What happened here? She said, no, he went so far up that, like, I was just kind of looking in the wrong place. And it, like, as soon as I kind of checked that out, I was like, oh yeah, I can kind of connect to him really far up in the light. And but over time, I could kind of feel that peace. Like, I always have the love that we shared here in this lifetime, but I could kind of feel that peace, like, that maybe he has chosen to kind of come back into form in some way, because he was kind of not there anymore, you know, and feeling that, like, oh, okay, I think he's actually decided to kind of come back into form. But he visited me recently. Him and my other dog visited me recently in a very, very palpable dream. They were together, like, where I woke up crying from it, but in a way that was so touching. It was so beautiful. And I love that idea that you were just talking about, that, like, yeah, I've kind of put these, like, finite limitations on this, and maybe it's a little outside, like, that unfathomable idea of that it can be everything everywhere all at once, right? That he can have reincarnated, and that's okay. Like, as you know, kind of letting that go, as far as, like, oh, I can't feel him in the light anymore, and I'm okay with that, because I know, like, what we shared in is still really special, and, like, I don't need that piece of it. But then I was, like, a little confused about the dream, and it's like, now that you say that, I'm like, well, he can be reincarnated to however he chooses, and there's no limitation to the idea that he can still be here in some form, with how I kind of think of that.
Yeah. Something, just you saying limitation, something that just reminds me of when I talked about my first degree class earlier on, and I felt that it, you know, I hadn't really got anything from it in particular. Of course, unbeknownst to me, I got loads from it. But one of the things I really got from it was, I remember the teacher saying, the only limitation is your own imagination. And that has stuck with me. And the other thing that our family often say is, when somebody passes over, we'll say, well, now they know the secret that we're all wondering, you know?
Yeah.
So we're not going to know until we go, wherever that is. And my grandmother was a great woman for my mum's mum. She was always laughing about death in a good way, you know? It's not what was it she used to say? It would be like, you know, you get pie in the sky when you die, or we're going in a hallelujah train. And she was looking forward to it. You know, so
like that too.
Yeah, it goes.
Yeah, so
like
you know, it's like, we weren't scared of that when we were young. We weren't scared of dying, and I'm just not ready to go yet. I've still got things to do. But it's like, you know, there's a part of me that almost looks forward to knowing what it is. You know, it's like a rebirth into something else, into a higher awareness, at least.
Well, and then the ones on the other side, they're always like, it's so much more than you can even fathom.
Yeah.
And that we're here for such a short time, be here.
Yeah. So enjoy this.
They always talk about that. Like,
enjoy this. Yeah.
So short. And like, you boop, boop, you're in and you're out.
It's incredible.
Less than a blink of an eye in the scheme of eternity, you know?
Yeah. So enjoy this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
well, you know, you talked about the deepest grief, and since you know, there are you want to share about that too?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when Jonathan died, obviously it was the worst thing we could ever have imagined. And there's many things that help me to understand that everything's exactly as it's meant to be. And I'm grateful for that. But when I think about, you know, what has held me up through the most difficult times, and it really truly is Reiki and meditation and my breath and my heart. It's like 4 cornerstones that shore me up through the toughest of times, because even though it's 14 years since Jonathan passed, there's moments when I can still be on my knees in deep grief. It doesn't go away, you know, it changes, but it doesn't actually go away. And I think that when the accident happened, it was a car accident, and Jonathan had just passed his test and he was driving. And 4 people could have passed that day, but it was only Jonathan's turn to go. And the day, I take this back to the day that Jonathan was born. The day that Jonathan was born, I said to my friend Sandra, I won't have him for long. Now, what a strange thing to say for a start. And I actually forgot all about that. And she reminded me the day that I told her that he died, which was the day that he died. Remember, Lorna, you said you wouldn't have him for long. Jonathan was 17. And also, when, I don't know, Jonathan was about 12, I had a reading with a very dear friend. He's like a spiritual advisor to me. His name's Mark Halliday, and he's a shaman in Portobello in Edinburgh. And I've been going to him for about 20 years on and off. And I probably see him on average once a year or something like that. Anyway, I'd gone one day to see him, and he said, you know, Jonathan's going to realize his potential at his coming of age, not when he's 18, not when he's 21, at his coming of age. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, he's going to understand what he wants to be or what he wants to do with his life. And I didn't think for a minute he was going to like realize his potential, and actually that would, his life was over in that moment, and he was 17 and a half. So I just find these things really interesting. But also 3 weeks before Jonathan passed, and again, we had no idea this was going to happen, there was things that happened that when I look back with the wonderful 2020 vision that hindsight can give us, it was as if everything just lined up, you know. When he passed his test, I'll give you a couple of examples. When he passed his test, his driving test, he said, Mum, let's go out on the motorway. And I was like, well, we'll go from this stop to the next stop. And we'll go, that's fine, okay. And I was like, oh my God, we're on the motorway. Jonathan just passed his test. And that was great. And when he came back, he said to me, I really need to put legal insurance on my policy. Now, it cost him a fortune for his insurance because he was only 17, and he paid it all himself, and he paid for his car because his whole life was guitars, skateboards, and cars. So that was one thing that kind of helped Rachel after the event, was the fact that he had legal services. She could get a lot of care that she needed, that we wouldn't have been able to get otherwise financially at that time. But also Rachel, who was a vegetarian at the time, and isn't now, but she was at the time, she'd seen this black leather jacket, and she said to me, I've seen this lovely black leather jacket that I would like, and I think I've asked my dad to get it, then if he buys it, it'll be secondhand to me. And I was like, really? And she wore this jacket on the day, and she never wore leather, but this day she wore this leather jacket, and that was the jacket that saved Rachel's life. It was covered, the glass was all stuck in the jacket. And there's loads of other things as well that happened in the run-up, and I think to myself, my goodness, she was meant to be saved, you know. And the way that he comes back in, and you know, like you're saying, Robyn, your dogs have come in a dream, and they maybe don't feel so palpable now because you know, they may have reincarnated or whatever. It's like that with Jonathan now, but for the first few years it was very clear that he was around. And now he comes in moments, not so much, but definitely with other people. And I think, gosh, you know, even after all this time, this is happening. When my ex-husband died, he came in and he showed me that him and Alec had got together. When my dad died, Alec and him and my dad got together. It was clear that the visions I was getting, it was absolutely clear. And some people would think I was crazy, but that's okay. That's okay.
There's
that's why you're
validation.
I know what I know,
Yeah,
I know what
exactly.
what I'm feeling and what I'm getting, what I know. I don't need anybody else to validate that,
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Well, and part of the reason that we're in the communities that we're in, because like there's no doubt here that is exactly what you experienced,
Yeah. And there's only certain people I would have those conversations with, of course.
Yeah.
So here we are talking to the
sharing
world.
well, and because other people have the same experiences too, and how do you find your ways through it? Like you say, what holds you up, and how do you find your ways through it and find the grace that is there even in the grief? And
there's definitely times when I have felt absolutely held by, whatever this is. It's abundantly clear that I'm not on my own with this, I don't know. There's miracles happening all around us, and there's blessings beyond measure in all of it. I'm so grateful. So grateful. And often people say, how come you can still have a happy life and yet your children had that tragic accident and you lost your son? People thought I would lose my faith in Reiki and everything that I do, but it really only almost lifted that up and made it even more. I don't really know how to explain that, but it catapulted me into doing even more with Reiki.
Yeah.
So even though we can be in the deepest grief, and I know it's not like this for everybody, but for me, this is my experience, and yes, I can still be in deep grief. However, I also know that I can lift myself out of that at this time. But there's times when I've thought, oh my God, I don't know how I'm ever going to get through this. But at the time, my main concern was taking care of my daughter because she was 4 years in recovery.
And how is she now?
She's amazing. She's amazing. She's a shining light in my life and in many people's lives, actually. She's a Holy Fire Reiki teacher. She's not teaching at the moment, but she has the ability to. She's a crystal healer and a great meditator and all sorts of other things. But she's in the middle, back in studying. Since her dad died, she decided to come out of her job, which was always with charity work. She worked with a lot of different charities as a fundraiser, and then she decided to leave that when we were in the pandemic, and she threw herself back into studying. So she's studying counselling at the moment, CBT and various other things, and she's about halfway through her course, which is full on, and she's also a reflexologist and various other things. So yeah. She's a magic wee witch. So she is a wee Scottish witch from good witch stock.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was saying. It's like, well, there's that genetic lineage again.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Lorna. Like Colleen said, it's also beautiful because I know people listening will definitely find solace in your words. So thank you for sharing.
Well, I believe that if we can share how we truly feel, then it might help someone else. So thank you for allowing me to say, something about Jonathan and Rachel, because it's been a major event in my life, of course.
Shaped who you are, and
yeah, it does. And also, I guess I have an opportunity to share, to teach Reiki, and I'll be doing this on a voluntary basis again with some other doulas. I'm also a volunteering doula, birthing doula. So I don't know what your situation is over there, but here in Scotland, we have a lot of trafficked women. Glasgow is a particular hub for trafficked women. and for people looking for status in the country. So we have a lot of refugees here for many, many years. But this past while, there's an organisation called AMA Birthing Companions that started up. It's a charity, and I became part of that on day one. And I've been trained as a birthing doula, which is just an amazing opportunity to be in the birthing room with mamas and supporting them in that way. So I've been invited a wee while back to teach Reiki to all the volunteers so that they can bring Reiki into the birthing room. So that's going to hopefully be happening starting next year. And it's a real joy to be able to do that for them, you know. But I would be offering that just as on a volunteering basis, the way that I do sometimes, just depending on the situation. I'll sometimes set up just a class volunteer and just ask them to pay it forward in some way, you know.
Wow.
We did that for some homeless people in the woods a few years ago, my partner Richard and I. He was working with the Marie Trust at the time, who's an organisation that help people that are homeless. And there was a lot of men who were interested to learn about being in the woods. So we, both Richard and I, are been trained by the Forestry Commission as bushcraft trainers. You know, we can take people into the woods and set fire and things like that carefully. But you know, in Scotland, it's a completely different situation to where you live, where there's fires, you know, that are really dreadful. Thankfully, in Scotland, we have some rain and it's okay. But in the woods there, we can have a little fire and cook on the fire, and you know, they were doing poetry and wood whittling and all sorts of things. But they also wanted to learn about meditation and Reiki. So we've had some really beautiful opportunities to teach, particularly men in those groups that are homeless, you know. That's a wee while back now as well, but it's just lovely to be able to do that. It's something that's quite different.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. So
Yeah.
is that then if you have, do homeless people mostly live in the woods there?
No, nowadays, at that time, people were living on the streets.
Okay.
However, since COVID, most people who are declaring themselves as homeless are placed in hotels here.
Oh.
But there's still a lot of people that don't want to be inside four walls. They want to be outdoors. They want to stay where they're staying. So I don't know how that's policed or managed, but I know that it still goes on. And you know, I can understand that to a level. If people don't want to be enclosed in a space. So I know that there's still people living on the streets, and that might be in the woods, of course, but we would take them very specifically to the woods so that they were in nature, like, so the nearest nature place that we could take them rather than in the city. Just for the change of
I
that.
ask just because I think it's such a global problem that
Yes,
I think that
absolutely.
it's interesting hearing in different countries how that, you know, how that's being managed.
Yeah,
well,
it's tricky because there's also organized crime in Glasgow as well as around. I know it's probably everywhere now, where people are brought in to beg on the streets and they're not actually homeless, and it's an organized thing. So sometimes if you're in the city and you want to offer somebody something, you don't actually know whether it's legitimate or not, if they genuinely are homeless. But also the other part of that is considering, why would that person want to do that if they're in an organized crime ring that they maybe can't get out of, and the money that they're getting on the streets isn't going to them? It's a very horrible situation, and I don't know the answers to that either. It's just, I'm very aware of it. A few years ago, there was a guy in Bristol down south who started an organisation called the Rucksack Project, and I became very involved in it, and Glasgow became the Rucksack Project. It got so big where people put certain items, we would ask for certain items, people put certain items into a rucksack and it was given to a homeless person. That was the gist of it. And it ran for about 4 years here, and it became really, really big. And then there was some things that happened that just meant it shut down. The guy in Bristol wanted to shut it down, but it was happening all over the country. It was a really good, at the time, it was a really good thing that we did. But I think from that, other things have happened, which means that people that are in these situations are still getting a lot of help, but they're maybe not getting the right help. I don't know. It's difficult to talk about as well, because I don't know enough about, you know, everything that's going on in the different organizations that try to help.
Yeah, absolutely.
But certainly we've passed Reiki on as best we can in some situations there, and hopefully that'll help a little bit.
Yeah, as you were talking about that, just the same thing here where people do offer Reiki. And then you were also talking about Reiki for staff members. And I think that's another area that it's so helpful because, you know, as we've talked about compassion fatigue and managing when you're doing, so for instance, even a lot of the volunteer work that you're doing, having the Reiki energy, as you say, to manage the compassion and stay in the place of this is what I can do, and it is making a difference, and it does help, and it does make a difference.
Yeah, and it might only be something very small, but hopefully, it makes a difference. But in that process, and my daughter's a great one for reminding me of this, Mum, remember your boundaries, remember to not overdo it for yourself, remember, you know, that compassion fatigue that we talked about in the animal Reiki. Particularly, I brought that into our other Reiki classes because it's so important that we recognize this for ourselves, that we can overdo it. You know, I think if our nature is to, you know, immediately something needs help, then our first instinct is to help. But what about ourselves? Sometimes this is the one that we forget. So yeah, boundaries, I've had to work on that and work on it and work on it. Still learning, definitely.
Lifelong boundary education.
Definitely. And it's something I bring into my classes to take care of yourself first. And I have to bring myself back to that reminder all the time. What about you, Lorna?
I know it's so commonly used, but you know, can't you pour from an empty cup?
The truth. That's the truth.
Yeah.
And I know this for myself because I've done it, you know, I've
got
that far down the line and I've made myself really unwell and had to pull myself back up again. So
it's easy
a lot.
That, and it is also one of the harder things to remember, because I think also we're naturally givers. We want to help. We want to. Yeah,
it's your default. It's your default position is to help someone else, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I talk about a lot with that has helped me is, and I believe that Reiki is very, very specifically engaged in, is learning how to receive.
Yes.
And, you know, going into in the moment of what can I do? Well, I can receive Reiki right now. And what do I do to manage this? Just open my heart and receive and start there. And then everything else flows from that place.
So remembering to receive for myself, absolutely, Colleen, to, you know, to give Reiki to myself is the first thing, because I can do that every day, and I do, usually at night time, and then I fall asleep and, you know, I presume that it's stayed on all night and I'm fine. But often through the day, in moments, just stopping and, you know, just breathing, remembering my breath, remembering my heart, coming back to myself, just in a moment. And I can do that in the middle of a Reiki class. I'll just stop. Just, you know, just stop. And it just brings me back into the moment right now, especially when I'm in a class. It's just great. But to go and lie down and receive, it's wonderful. You know, it's great to be able to do it for ourselves, but it's lovely to be on the therapy couch receiving from, you know, chosen people.
Yeah, and I think for me, that's what helped me when I learned to, if let's say I'm in a, I'm using Reiki for problem solving, whatever that is. And a lot of times that my mind has gone into a negative worry or a spin or something. So, I stop and think, okay, what can I do? First of all, to notice it, then to just take a moment and invite Reiki so I can receive it. And then it seems to sort through it for me or help me sort through it, move to solution. And if a boundary is the solution, it clarifies it. Because as Robyn was saying, you were saying, I think, so many of us in these fields, first of all, we're very empathic. So we notice things that other people need so quickly. It's part of just our natural radar. And so then, the discernment of, is there something I can do? Should I be doing something? Have they asked? And so all of those kind of skills that I use, I've learned that I have to start with the receiving, because that's what puts it into order for me and helps me clarify. One of the big ones for me is, did they ask? I have to remind myself all the time, because I'm so naturally like, I'll step in to help, or I'll step in to do whatever's needed. It's just always been the way I am. And so I finally learned, oh, but did they ask?
Yeah.
And so sometimes then it's like, then using Reiki, receiving Reiki to discern that part of it. And then is it my responsibility? And I only say all this, I know you know all this, I only say it because I think it's such a common thing that we navigate as Reiki people, because we are commonly empathic and givers.
It's our default, isn't it, to
Yes.
naturally just go in. But I think that, what you're saying about discernment is key.
Yes.
Once you realize, then you can do something about that, whether that's about not diving in. My daughter and I were only talking about this evening, and how she's so aware of her classmates. She was automatically going in to give them the information that they didn't even ask for.
Yeah.
So she's overextending herself, and she didn't have to. So she's now realizing this and saying, well, if anybody asks me, I'll tell them, but I don't need to go in, all guns ready to assist on every level. Because she's very like me, and even more so, so because she's the next generation, so it's grown. And you'll see this with your Luna, Robyn, your kids, you'll just see it. You'll see it with Robyn. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So discernment is key. Once we realize what we're doing, then we can stop and pull ourselves back. But that's not always easy. And I've certainly made mistakes this way, where I've just dived in too much, and then I've overstepped somebody's boundary. So that teaches you.
Or even my own boundaries.
Yeah. Even your own boundaries. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly teaches me to just hold back just a little bit and think about this,
Well, you said earlier that you're almost 64 and I'm 65, almost 66. And I think that's one of the big advantages is at this age, it's like, okay, well, maybe I'll just take a moment and receive, then I'll step back, then I'll use discernment. And, I definitely have more or less impulsive, like just go do it. And so,
yeah, because
anyway.
haven't we had to learn this maybe sometimes the hard way,
Yes.
we've had a lot of time to learn it, so
Yeah.
I think that we're getting there.
And then we have our daughters to remind us.
Yes, thank God.
Robyn, I'm only laughing. I won't go into the whole story. I'm only laughing about the me wanting to help the lady at the park.
Oh yeah.
And Robyn was like, no, there are other people to help her. I had just come off of a 2-week, like serious sickness. And I was so weak already that's why she was tracking me so much. And I decided I had to help this woman who's probably 25, doesn't need my help, didn't ask for my help.
Yeah.
And it was so interesting because it took me a while to get to the discernment part. And luckily I did have her to come in and say, no, this is not your, don't, you need to not be doing this. It was like 10 o'clock at night in a park and dark. And I was
Stone steps and tree roots and walking downhill.
I was wobbling.
Don't need to fix her life, Colleen, right now.
It's like, no, there are other people here. They will help her.
Yeah, I live in a small town, so people are very, like willing to help people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a really good recent, that default reaction that you're talking about. And then it was interesting to me the next day to observe how long it took me to get to discernment. And I probably wouldn't have if Robyn hadn't come in and stepped in the moment.
Oh, thank God for you, Robyn, because it's so important for us to recognize this now, isn't it? I mean, the more that we overstep ourselves then and realize, because we can get exhausted doing that, can't we? So then we realize, okay, we have to take care of ourselves just a little bit better. So it's a constant learning for me.
I think it's a constant learning for everyone, but one of the things that I've definitely noticed is that the culturally created piece of that is shifting. So you do see it more commonly of, self-love, boundaries, taking care. And I definitely think it's to do with even the wisdom of like, the generation ahead of us that are doing this work, that's helping, kind of the collective to learn about it. And then our generations that are like, okay, we need to shift this here, because it's not, I mean, obviously we're in these communities that talk about this stuff a lot, but you see it also a lot in, like the therapy communities, things like counseling communities, things like that, and other communities as well. But that about those boundaries, that boundaries are love, that boundaries, you can't pour from an empty cup type scenarios and said, and all of the different ways that people say it depending on where it's coming from. And also one of the things that you see pretty commonly about these topics with other people is, ask the people, do you need me to fix this, or do you just need me to listen? And so, so that's, and of course, none of us are perfect at it. And we make mistakes and we have to learn, but that's a really huge thing that has shifted, I think, too. Like culturally, we're seeing that. And for so long, I think, especially as women, and of course, men too, and even outside of the binary, so I don't mean it just that, but that we were taught that we needed to somehow fix this or fix ourselves in kind of an unhealthy way with it, that it's better to give than receive, all of those kinds of ideas that have started to shift, and that it is good to give, as we know, and it's also good to receive, and the balance of these ideas. And as we're bringing back in more of that archetypal divine feminine within all of us, the healed and the healed masculine within all of us, that these things are starting to shift. And even in parenting, some of the like parenting accounts that I follow, and the new ways of ideas, like when you're looking up, like, how do I deal with this with my kid? Like the parenting advice is, a lot of times with your children, you just need to listen, and you can even ask them, would you like me to try to help fix this, or do you just need to share and to listen? And so I think that that's also a huge piece of it, that it's amazing to kind of watch that ripple effect of that shifting into, healthier message all the way around in the generations, and then thinking of that into the ripple effect of the children too, and how that will, her growing up with that. And obviously I'm human and I make lots of mistakes when it comes to parenting and friendship and, familyship and all of those things. But yeah, I do think it's shifting a lot, which is really amazing to see.
It truly is. And my mom and I had this kind of conversation recently about how things were for her, how things are changing and changed for me, and how so much has changed for Rachel. And you know, that next generation, like yourself, Robyn, we need to listen to your generation, so that we can also evolve. My mum, she'll be like, she's fascinated by all of this, and she loves to hear what's happened in a class or who said what. And I'm like, well, there's some things I can say, and there's some things obviously I can't say, but I can tell her, you know, where we're at. And she's, you know, you could be retired now, Lorna. And I'm like, why would I even want to do that, Mum? You know, like, because she retired young, and like in this country, you can't retire. Well, I can't retire till I'm 67, where it used to be 60. And she sees that as like, well, then you can do more for me. And I'm like, Mum, no, I'm already doing lots for you, and my sister does lots for you, and we can do what we can do. But this isn't going to, I'm not going to retire. I'll probably drop dead teaching Reiki someday in a class. You know, that would be my ideal way to go. But when I listen to my daughter and listening to you there, Robyn, it's like, look at how much is changing culturally, and how important all of that is. And I know that it's very much happening here in Scotland, but it's happening all over the world. And we're having to wake up to a new way of communicating, even, obviously, with, you know, even this way, but so much more in the way that we speak with each other and how we address everything. Everything's changed. I'm learning from Rachel all the time. I'm like, teach me, because I need to know more about this. The last thing I want to do is speak in an unkind way, or a misunderstood way, because I didn't understand how things have changed, because things are changing so fast, and we're, you know, sometimes finding it difficult to keep up. So yeah, Robyn, everything that you said there makes so much sense. And yeah, I listened to Rachel and all the things that she learned, and she really throws herself into learning so much about this, and I know it's going to do her good in her career. But we all have to move forward. We all have to take our responsibility in that too. We can't just continue the way that we're continuing. We need to change. And I think that the holy fire information that comes through the 12 heavens of the culturally created and moving back to our authentic self is so inspiring. And it's like we can all see ourselves in that. You know, when we're in class and we're talking about it, it's probably the same for yourselves. When we're speaking about it in class, it's like, do you recognize yourself in this? And people are like, yeah, I know this, I just didn't realize it. You know, that's amazing. I find that really exciting, that we can let go of so much that's already been programmed into us from the minute we're born. And I know a lot of that's been done with the best of intentions, but a lot of it is just the culturally created claptrap that goes on around with the media and society and community and the government and everything else, your politics, all the stuff that's going on every day in every country, everywhere.
And I think right now we're in such a global shift in the literal change of an age.
Yeah.
And from the outside authority that you and I grew up in.
Yeah.
And speaking of your mother and my mother and the men too. So not discounting, all of that, but it's, I think we are on the other side of, in our lifetime, we were going through the ending of this age and the beginning of this next age. And they kind of went like this back and forth. Sometimes we felt like we were in the beginning and then the ending would come back in. And sometimes they were, side by side. But I feel like now we are actually on the other side of the ending and in
I feel that. Yeah.
And, we often talk about, well, what can we do? And you were talking about listening to the future generation. And just, I wrote it down a while ago that we've been talking about working with grandmother energy, and particularly with this recent Libra, Venus Libra Sun conjunction, and what that's bringing in to the collective on a large scale, and how that's really bringing in this powerful grandmother energy. And this morning, as I was in that energy and in one of my journeys, and I was in the grandmother energy, and they had said this before, go to the descendants and ask them what you can do. And by grandmother doesn't mean a person has to be physically a grandmother. It's a frequency, it's a creation source, and it's an energy that many of us carry, and you can even see it already in children. So it's not specifically about lineage. But then they were showing me, as I've been going to the descendants to ask what we can do today that makes a difference for them. And today, when I went to the grandmothers of the ancestors, and again, these are the ancestors as well as my own, but going to the grandmother energy, and they said, go to the grandmother energy, go to the grandmothers of the descendants. And so I've been listening to that all day about go to the grandmothers of the descendants. Because as we were just talking, as the grandmothers, there's just so much that we have, and to be able to share from that perspective. And earlier, we were talking about how there is no past and future. It's all, it's all one stream of conscious, or it's, outside of time. There's no past and future in the same way we think of it here. So I'm really, it just came in right before we started our conversation. And when I saw you and we first turned on the Zoom, I went, well, there you are. Here we are. And it's like, let's ask, there it is.
Colleen, a number of years ago here in Glasgow, we had visitors come from North America, and they were known as the grandmothers and the grandfathers. And we had circles here in Glasgow, and I was there. The first night I wasn't there, my daughter was there, and she said, Mum, you have to come tomorrow night. And the reason I didn't want to go was because there was somebody there that I'd had a bit of an altercation with, and I didn't really want to go. But then I thought, no, I need to go. So I went. And at the end of the meeting, Grandmother Susan Stanton stood up, and she said, if any of you feel called to do this work, come. And I didn't feel that was me, because in the time I was just in my 50s, I was quite young. Well, I mean, I was younger than this. And I went up to her because I had part of a tree and I had water. And she was going to do 2 ceremonies. And I said, can you include these in the ceremonies? The water was water from the Ganges, and the tree was from a tree in our garden, and it related to Jonathan. And she was having a water ceremony and a fire ceremony. And I said, can you take these and include them? And she said, you know that you're a grandmother. And I kind of stood back, because I thought, well, I'm not a grandmother physically, and I probably won't be a grandmother physically. That's unlikely, and I'm okay with that. But she said, no, it doesn't matter your age. Just what you're saying, Colleen, it doesn't matter your age. You carry the wisdom and you carry the understanding, even if you don't consciously know it. So there was 13 of us, and we came together as a group of grandmothers here in Scotland. And some of us we've all went off and done our own thing. None of us really get together anymore. We still kind of know each other. Some of us are closer than others, but there's work going on.
Yes.
I'm doing my part. They're all doing their part. And we carry the wisdom of, all the generations before us. They talk about at least 7 generations, but it's more than that, and 7 generations going forward.
Yes.
And we all have that. I've very recently, as you'll see, grown out all my wise wires. let go of the hair dye because, you know, society says we should look a certain way, and at this age I should look younger than I look. Oh, but I feel that now's the time to just be my authentic grey-haired self, and I'm okay with that. But the work that we can do, I've held circles for 20 odd years for women and for men. And the women and the men, there's not so many men, and there's not been so many men's circles, but the women that come along, they have so much to share and they have so much to learn. And we just sit in circle and support each other. And I know that there's so much more that we can do. And I think that we're doing it in whatever way we can. So yeah, totally get the grandmothers. And I feel honoured to be able just to mention that just now. Just it's very humbling actually, to know that we're coming into our, you know, what they call about our wiser years, or we're the crone, the age of the crone. I feel very much that I'm there.
Yes.
It's really fascinating.
I can take on that role of being able to hopefully share a little bit of wisdom that I've gathered over the years, but I don't know, to be someone that someone can come to and just ask a question. I might not have the answer, but I might know somebody else that does, and then we can find out. I don't know. There's something else about this. It's a much, much bigger thing than that. What we're teaching through Reiki, through the animal Reiki, through the connection with nature, the world peace, the holy fire, all of this, it's such a body of teaching that has been gifted to all of us, and it, you know, whoever wants to receive it, they can receive it. It's magical.
There's oh, go ahead, Colleen.
No, go ahead.
Well, it's just interesting to listen to you both, and also I'm just kind of like listening into the idea as this is becoming, maybe as the grandmothers are able to say these, you know, talk about these things, but also just hearing like the repairing of the past as well, is that is happening in a parallel kind of idea. And Lorna, I know you've talked about in Scotland. I mean, obviously there's a lot of that idea in so many different ways that we could go into, but I know that you've talked about it in Scotland with the pardoning of the witches. And I'm just curious if you have any kind of thoughts around that and insight too. Is this energy and kind of idea of the grandmothers is also becoming maybe even more able to be talked about?
Definitely, you know, it's almost like we're coming out of the woodwork and we can't be silenced anymore. And those who see themselves as healers or herbalists, or, you know, for want of a, whatever the description is that is given as this word witches, there's all the women are. That's what I feel. We all have the ability, but also so many men also have this. And the men in Scotland, we are so fortunate. There are so many men who are really coming together now and showing up in the way that their fathers didn't, or their grandfathers didn't. And it's because they probably didn't know how to. Yeah. You know, so much of this has all been shut down for so many years, and now it's like we can talk about it again, and people can show, you know, their natural healing abilities, and bring them to life again. And I just think we're so fortunate. You know, recently, I think I mentioned it to you, Nicola Sturgeon, who's our Scottish person in the Parliament here, gave some kind of pardon. And there was a lot of mixed reviews about that, you know, like, who is she to do that? And that's not enough. But it was something.
Do you want to explain that just a little bit in case some of our listeners don't know?
for one person to stand up and say that she's offering a pardon to witches or whatever's happened, that when I don't have the full quote here to say what she said, some people might feel that that's not enough. So much has happened. So many people lost their lives here in Scotland alone, and I know that, you know, it's worldwide, but in Scotland here on the East Coast, there's still talk about, you know, it's talked about a lot still. And yes, it's good that there's been some kind of pardoned for what?
Right.
Right? That's where I'm coming from in this. Pardon for what? For being yourself, for being a woman, for being a healer, for being a herbalist or a man, you know, whatever it is, for being somebody who was mostly doing good.
A midwife.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What would you need to be pardoned for?
Yeah.
That does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That is.
So yeah, okay, that's something, but I don't really know what would be being pardoned for. Because those people were drowned or burned at the stake or whatever happened to them, they were murdered. So, and I know, you know, we see it in TV movies and all sorts of things about Salem, and, you know, right there where you are, I don't know how close you are to that, but a lot of it is fantasized. And anyway, we're back.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's the biggest piece of it right now, you know, where we are. And that's why I really love the idea. I'm excited about doing Reiki journeys to the grandmothers of the descendants. And it's not that I'm leaving out the grandfathers. They have the blessings and the energy and the wisdom too. I'm really kind of following a direction of an energy asking me to go to the grandmothers in the descendants, and like you say, 7 generations or even more ahead, and ask what we can do today for them today. And one of the things that the descendants, before, you know, I got the information to go to the grandmothers, actually talked about, even what you mentioned at the very beginning of this call, Lorna, was how important this global communication is. And when we first, you know, went to the descendants at the very beginning of the pandemic, and, you know, all the global uprisings and things going on here in the United States and political all over the world, asking what we can do to the ancestors. And that's what they said: go to the descendants and ask them. And they actually, the descendants actually talked about how important it is that we contribute good energy, good message, power of, you know, the higher frequencies of life force energy into these technologies of global communication, because we are at the infancy of it. And, you know, we see the possibilities, how amazing this is. When we first did podcasts, I did them on free conference call, which thank you, freeconferencecall.com. But it was always a global teleconference call. So everything was still on the phone. And now we get to see each other and hear about what's going on in your part of the world and our part of the world. And bottom line is, we all love. And that's the whole thing.
And when you say love, I just want to touch on something else that I offer, which is the Munay Ki Rites.
Oh yeah.
Munay means love, Ki means energy. And you may know about the Munay Ki. And this was why I went to Peru. I've done quite a lot of journeying over the years, and Peru was something that called me 3 weeks before I got there. It was a very spontaneous journey. I was gifted the Munay Ki Rites the year after Jonathan died. And I remember at the time thinking, wow, this is amazing. It's such a beautiful thing to share, because these are rites of passage. And I then received them a number of times, because they're gifted to you as seeds that you grow yourself with fire. And I'm thinking, wow, this is just like, you know, by the time Holy Fire came in, it was like more fire and more fire. And I just love it. I light a fire every single day, and that might just be a candle, but it's still a fire, you know. And I just want to share just a little bit, because I feel that Reiki and the Munay Ki Rites weave together beautifully. I'm just going to read this so that I get it absolutely clear, okay? The rites of the Munay Ki, they help to transform and upgrade your luminous energy field. They're energetic transmissions that heal the wounds of the past, the karmic and genetic programs, and the beliefs that we inherit. They reinform our DNA, enabling us to grow a new body that ages, heals, and dies differently. So one of my teachers is Alberto Villoldo, and he has learned, been gifted all these rites from the shamans in the high Andes. And that's why I went to Peru, was to meet them and go into the Andes and receive them. And now I teach them. But it's something that we become earth keepers, peacekeepers, and way showers and light bearers, which we are with Reiki too. So I just feel that they really weave together really beautifully. It's like it adds something else to how we can choose to live. And these rites, there's a healer's rite, there's a harmony rite, there's a daykeeper's rite, a seer's rite. There's various rites: wisdom keeper's rite, earth keeper's rite, and creator rite, star keeper's rite. There's 9 different rites, and then there's another rite called the rite of the womb. And the rite of the womb is something that we can pass on, that these really do help to heal the generations backwards and forwards from all the trauma that we might carry. And of course, we can help to heal ourselves with Reiki, but these rites, they really do help us in another way. And I just wanted to just mention them, and you can find that information on my website.
I can feel it as you're speaking of it.
Yeah,
and
it's right there. I mean, there's loads of people teaching it in America.
Mm-hmm.
And my main teachers are through an organization called the Four Winds.
The 4 rites?
4 Winds.
4
The
winds.
4 Winds, yeah.
Are you teaching any of that online?
I can do, and I know that they are being taught online by Alberto and the 4 Winds. They are teaching online. You can go on and learn that way. Mostly I teach in person, but I know that I can teach online, and I'm willing to do that in certain circumstances. It's fine. I might do it once a year. And we wouldn't have been able to do that before. And even when we were able to do it at the start, it was very much frowned upon, just like it was with Reiki as well. A lot of the time, people didn't like it. It was like, how can you possibly do that? And yet, look at how powerful it is. We know how powerful it is. So thank God for this technology, you know, for God is.
Yes. Well, I'm so glad you brought that up. And that is, for those of you that are listening and can't see what we're saying, Munay Ki Rites is MUNAYKI Rites. And it's you've spelled it RITES.
Yes, because they're rites of passage.
Yeah, Munay Ki Rites. Beautiful. Well, Lorna, we could talk for hours.
We have.
We have been. Yes, we have already. So let's go ahead and share with everybody again how they reach you is lornamclean.co.uk, and McLean is spelled MCLEAN. So it's lornamclean.co.uk, and her email is lorna@lornamclean.co.uk, and then Instagram and Facebook is also under Lorna McLean, so you can find her there. And all of your different offerings. Is there anything else you want to finish up with or share about what you're doing? Anything upcoming that?
Well, I've got my usual classes coming up, and I guess looking forward into the new year, offering Reiki drumming, and the animal Reiki course, of course, is coming up again in the spring. And I've keep getting asked to do interviews with people. I know a lot of people, especially in Scotland, and maybe do some podcasts. So that's something I am thinking about. And actually being on here with you both is actually inspiring me to consider that even more. So maybe I'll have you guys back on to speak for us in Scotland.
Well, it's so funny because when we were first starting and before we turned the recording on, and I said, now, if you have any questions, be sure you let us know, because I was thinking you may have questions about the technology part of it. And so we are happy to help you if there's anything, or just some of the things that we already know that, can help you
that's great
get
to know.
started. Because I think you would be fabulous with a podcast.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I've been told I should be doing it, and I've certainly got plenty of opportunities to do it. But yeah, I guess the technology is the thing. It's like I'm kicking and screaming all the way into the 21st century still, and we're in 2022. So I think it's an age thing. But yeah, I'm getting there slowly. I've now got my ear pods that keep falling out. But
I've decided, I'm like, and really one of the things you can do that I've been doing a lot of, and then we can wrap up because we could have this conversation another time, but for other people listening too, I watch a lot of YouTube instead of, other things I might watch. I'll watch YouTube on how to, like right now I'm trying to learn how to get better at Instagram stories and reels, right? So I don't even know like how to get to which one is which. And so trying to teach myself. So aside from Robyn helping me, I watch a lot of YouTube videos on it. So how to podcast.
Great. I'll have a look.
It's actually this simple. And one of the other things I'll just say real quickly is, you can listen to everything today. I didn't hear anything that we would need to edit. And that is a big piece where people feel like they need to edit. We just are us. And so we just let it be conversational and try to let it just be real life.
Well, it is real life. And I think if we keep it that way, it makes it more, well, it's real then, isn't it? Instead of trying to make it into something that it's not. So yeah, it's great.
That's good. I was going to say too, you could ask Rachel.
Rachel, there is any time. We're like the ships in the night trying to get time together, but I'll see her tomorrow night, so I'll definitely mention it.
And also, Lorna, if you do start one, we would love to be on your podcast.
I know, it'll be great. Thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute delight to share the evening with you. Thank you.
Really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for us, you can find everything at ReikiLifestyle.com, but everybody's used to that because
it's a Reiki Lifestyle podcast.
Exactly. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, we appreciate you so much, Lorna, and all that you do.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.